Hey, my name's Jonathan, and I'm a veteran.
Hi, my name is Daryl, and I'm a veteran.
My name is Chad, and I'm a veteran.
Hey, I'm Travis. I'm an Air Force veteran.
Hi, my name's Ashley, and I'm a veteran.
Okay, can you hear me now, Jason? Angry Sarge, welcome. Can y'all hear me? Give me a thumbs up in the chats if you can hear me. Okay, Jason says he can hear me. Let's see. I just want to make sure everybody else can hear me. Paul, can you hear me? All right, I got a thumbs up in the background. So I just wanted to do a little bit of some information, go over a little bit of information. So for those of you who have not or who are interested and in the area, we've got the first annual golf tournament for Minutes Wisely coming up. That is September 11th in Murfreesboro. We also have the Hero Stock. Now they just had a Hero Stock in Roland, Nebraska, I believe it is, and they've got one coming up August 3rd in Lebanon, Tennessee. So if you are a fan of veteran singers, songwriters, and just veteran get-togethers as a whole, that again is going to be August 3rd in Lebanon, Tennessee. You can go to herostock.org and get your tickets there. You can also, if you get the VIP tickets, and they're really inexpensive. I think I paid just a little over $50, and it's a reserve table and it has 4 seats. So really, really good prices there. But that's going to be in, as I said, Franklin, Tennessee that's going to be on August 3rd. And then I have also signed up for Vet Fest, and that's going to be, that's going to be in Franklin, Tennessee. It's the Vet Fest and Hero Stroll, Saturday, October 5th. That's going to be from 2:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. I also have joined Veteran Voice Radio's Semper Fi Country station. I do that one day a week now on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 Central Time. So really excited about that. So if you're interested in hearing our veteran singers and songwriters, you can go out. They have the app now for Semper Fi Radio on both Google and Apple stores. So you can download that as well. So, and then Angry Sarge, he's got the GOA event goals, and that's in August in Knoxville. He's going to be there also. So if you don't know who Angry Sarge is, he is a veteran as well. And so he was a great guest on my show earlier in the year. He'll be there, and he's also been invited to Range Day just prior to. So pretty exciting. Let's see. I do want to apologize. So we've been having some technical difficulties with my editing software. So unfortunately, I haven't been producing the shorts that I wanted to. So I'm hoping, modern technology, when they do updates, that always seems like things go sideways, but hopefully we'll get that squared away. So let's go ahead. Let me introduce you to Paul Flemming, and he is in the background. Keep your fingers crossed. We've got some sound for him. So hold tight. Hey, can you hear me yet?
Hey, Carolee.
You can hear me. I have no sound. Okay. So, yep, he's going to work on getting that done. Jim, thank you so much for being here. Hold tight, y'all. I'll be right back.
Hey, is this gonna work?
It will. If you have, do you have your cell phone handy? So, can you get to your email via cell phone?
No.
You cannot. Okay. Let's work with it.
Are you sure it's not? Are you sure you're not muting me on your end?
No, I can't hear you.
The system is telling me my speaker's working.
Okay.
You know, and the last time something like this happened, there was the host had me muted and didn't figure it out for some reason.
And that's what I was checking to see. So I've got my gaming headset on so you can hear me. And I can't hear you. So let's see here. Okay, hang on just a second.
Still don't have anything?
Oh wait, that was you on the phone.
How about now? Can you get me now?
No. I'll back out and just have them let them know. So hold on. Okay, y'all, we want to make sure that the issue is not on my end. So I'm going to go ahead back out and then I will be right back.
Testing 1, 2. Yep, I've got audio. I got audio. Carolee, can you hear me? I'm on the phone.
Okay, I can hear you on the phone.
I did a mic test on the help, and my bars are coming up while I'm even talking to you. So it's doing the suggestion on the host end of a mute, like I'm muted on your end.
Weird.
Are you using a headset or mic with a mute button?
I have my mic that has the mute and then my headphones. Let me just make sure they're.
Make sure you're not muted, it says.
It might be off. Hang on. Okay, go ahead and fix that. Oh, hang on a second.
Can you hear me?
See if this works.
Can you hear me, Carolee? Carolee? Anything? Anything?
All right. I think
Carol?
I got this. Can everybody hear me?
Can you hear me, Carolee?
I can hear you. It's actually my headphones were off.
It's all good.
All right. Good to go. Untrackable. Thank you. All right. Apologies for all of that. And I've got this mini blind line right in my face. So you'll see me kind of shifting depending upon which direction the sun goes. So, all right. Do you go by D Paul? Do you go by Paul? Do you go by D?
So my stage name, if you will, is D. Paul Flemming, but my friends call me Doug.
Doug. Excellent. Okay. So, am I considered a friend?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. I just want to make sure I don't want to overstep. So Navy, obviously, and that is obvious. They're hand in hand with the Marine Corps pretty much in a lot of aspects. So um, I do know a little bit about the Navy, but I'm really excited to have the conversation and learn some more today. So uh, also red face, smiling. Yes, everybody's giving me grief. Thank you, Angry Sarge. So, okay. So let's start a little bit about you, with your childhood. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and then education? A little bit more.
Want to know about my first 14 years before I was homeless? Give 2,442 steps a read. It'll stir your pot.
Wow. I would love to get my hands on that. And where can they get that book?
Amazon is the easiest path, or you can reach out to me and I'll you can buy one from me.
Excellent. Good to know.
Amazon's the easiest.
Excellent, because I would love to share that and make sure that we can get that out to the masses where we can. So excellent. So
if you want to read a story of resiliency, you know, I wrote the book, and my wife and I had been together for 50 years, as I like to say. And when it was published, I handed her a copy, and she sat down, started reading it. Didn't talk to me for days on end. Spent my whole life with her, and I never said a word about my childhood. But she looked at me and she said, "You weren't abused; you were tortured."
Oh goodness.
So it's a tough read, but it's a powerful read if you're looking for a hell of a story, right? Because there's some funnies in there that will make you laugh and cry at the same time. And if you want to read about the spirit inside of a person who has a faith that's unshakable, read that book, 2,442 Steps to Crazy. You know,
wow.
And I warn people though. I say, look, bring time, a pillow, and Kleenex, because once you start reading that book, you're not going to want to stop. It's a page turner, and the pillow is so you don't throw the book when you get all jacked up on the crazy, as I call them. Wow. It's a heck of a read, but
so
anyway,
a difficult childhood.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I ask that question with every veteran, and it's because I think the stereotypical person thinks the ones who just don't know. I think it's just an assumption that people with bad childhoods are the only ones that join the military, and that's far from the truth. But you have all types of individuals, whether their childhood was good or bad, and so it's interesting for me to hear those answers. But I am really excited to get my hands on that, so I will definitely be in contact with you for that one. DJ Play Nice, thank you for dropping in. He won't be able to stay, but he just wanted to jump in and show his support. So thank you for that. And he'll be watching the replay, he says. So what about your education? Were you studious?
Yeah.
You were?
So I worked full time and slipped in the rest of my high school in between working full time. My senior year and through my junior year, but throughout my senior year, I worked third shift. Got out at 7, went to the high school, took a shower, went to class at 8, went back to the place I was staying and watched Young and the Restless on 12:30s, Mondays through Fridays, right?
You were a Young and Restless guy. I was a Days of Our Lives gal.
Come on. Come on, there were 3 channels back then, and Young and the Restless was the show, okay? It's
Oh.
still on the air. And
It is
Nikki's
still on
still
the air.
there, by the way.
I know. But yeah, that was mine. Mine was Days of Our Lives. That's so funny. And so while you're working, right, you suddenly say, I'm going to join the military. Was it somebody introduced you to the military? How did you end up joining? And then specifically, not just joining, but joining the Navy?
Yeah, that's a story in and of itself. I knew from a very young age that I was going in the military. You know, I knew it. I just knew. And I always thought it was going to be the Navy, but I wanted to go in the Marine Corps. And you know, in the course of being homeless and some challenging, some adventures growing up, I'll say, um, and I wasn't living at home for three years now. I got myself into a little bit of a pickle, and the guy who was standing, I should say, sitting behind the giant bench, had a robe on, real nice tie. You know,
Oh,
he wanted he wanted to see my enlistment papers before he would make a decision on my future. So I had to um, dig my I had to dig up my mother and go talk to her and bring a recruiter. And again, I tried to join the Marines, but she said no to the Marines. And her father was in the Navy for a career, and she said she'd sign for the Navy. So I hustled my butt back down to the recruiting area, grabbed the first Navy recruiter I could find, dragged his behind back to my mother's house, and you know, rest is history, right? So I was 17, showed him to the judge um, who turned out to be a Marine, and he made sure he made sure I knew that. But when you get to the next book that I wrote here, a date with
little bit
suicide,
more this way. There you go.
a date with suicide.
Okay.
You know, I kind of walk everybody through that adventure. You know, but it's always kind of cool when you really spin up a prosecutor because the judge is going to be satisfied with your enlistment papers. So
Yeah, yeah,
adventure.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so he did he give you grief for going into the Navy instead of the Marine Corps?
Oh no, he was dealing with a prosecutor who was extremely unhappy with the court's position, you know, and letting me get off and kind of go about my life. You know, so he had his hands full, but he did say the Marine Corps straightened him out, and that if he ever saw me in his courtroom again, you know, he would be on the side of the prosecutor. So never did visit him, but you know, fast forward a little bit, I did bump into that prosecutor a few more times.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So you get to the Navy and you're in boot camp. Tell me how that went.
Well, and again, I'm going to keep referring back to these books because the hardest thing I've ever done is sit down and tell these stories. But when I got off the bus, flew from the East Coast to San Diego and got off the bus, and that was my as I'm stepping off the bus and everybody's heading for the yellow footsteps and falling into formation. I got yanked out by a couple of shore patrol guys. So my stepfather, this crazy bastard, had uh, told some tales, and I got pulled out of line and had to go deal with getting some things straightened out. You know, it's falsifying my enlistment papers and so on. So my initial boot camp experience wasn't just some screaming drill instructors. It was I was surrounded by shore patrol and popped back into a cage for a little bit.
Oh my God.
I was sent back to boot camp, and for me, boot camp was a piece of cake. Man, people yelling at you, screaming, you got to do work, right? I was working full time and going to school, and so it wasn't tough for me. And the crazy part is, I left boot camp in worse shape than I went in.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, I was jacked. I was ready for boot. I was in great shape. So Navy doesn't make you do a lot of running.
Wow. I was going to ask that question because I know, obviously, I mean, I'm a Marine mom. So I have two Marines, and I do know they do make you run a lot, right? So, Richard Fleek on board. Thank you for joining tonight. So, um, you didn't do a lot of running. What can you tell me as far as funny stories with boot camp? Anything fun
Well,
that just sticks in your mind?
they assigned me as Master at Arms. Again, I was young. I didn't know any of this stuff. But Master at Arms is in charge of the whole boot camp, the 80 something man squad from the time they enter the barracks until they leave, and so on. Well, I got a funny story that was funny. It's funny in hindsight. It wasn't funny then, but and I prided myself on taking things very seriously and doing the right stuff. Right. Well, I got sent to what's called a marching party. Right. Those are for wayward children, and I wasn't a wayward child, but I went to marching party, and when I had the gumption to say something under my breath loud enough for the company commander to hear me, he pulled me aside and started reading me the riot act from inside his office. All right. Well, I was a little annoyed. So I said, this is bullshit. Okay. Well, that's what he did. His eyes went up and was like, then the other guy came in, shut the door and said, listen, recruit, you know why you're going to marching party? Because you need to lead by example. And we're sending you to marching party because you're a 4.0 sailor. And I was like, well, how the hell does that make sense? Right. And they shuffled me out of there, and it's, I don't know, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and you're going to go drill for the next so many hours. When I got to the tarmac, I did 3 push-ups, got called out, mustered out by a master chief who sent me on a dead run to open some door, and I walked inside, and I spent the next 4 hours serving coffee and soft drinks to a group of E6s and above. And then I had to run back and run around a few times, so I looked sweaty when I went to the barracks. But in hindsight, I learned a great lesson in life about paying the price for others not doing their job. And if you're in charge, listen, it all reflects on you. All right. In hindsight, how lucky can I get that I did such a good job that I didn't have to sit there and do push-ups and sit-ups for, 4 hours, and I got to serve coffee to a couple of Master Chiefs and some E6s.
Yeah, they got to know your name, didn't they?
I did. I got a stripe out of boot. So got a meritorious advancement out of boot. So it was a E2 and whatever that is, 3 months, whatever boot was.
That's awesome. And so you get through boot. It wasn't much of a challenge. Now, although you had to run a little bit there, but so your PDS, where did they end up stationing you then?
Yeah, so I did some schools out in San Diego, and then decided to follow my grandfather's steps. I got 2 grandfathers, one that did World War II. One landed on the beach in Normandy, second wave. Another one rode submarines out of the Pacific for the first 2+ years of the war. Up and down, he was up and down the from Japan and so on. And then he got transferred to Wisconsin to train submarine crews. So if anybody didn't know that they built and trained submarines and submarine sailors in Wisconsin during World War II, that's a life lesson right there.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
So I went to a basic submarine school and then some advanced schools, and I got sent to the fleet. You'll never guess what boat they sent me to. So who has ever heard of the Tom Clancy and his movie, The Hunt for Red October?
Yeah, I've read the book.
Dallas, SSN 700, the Big D. Spent 3 years, 2 months sailing on that boat, 2 years plus deployed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so the boat itself, what was it like being stuck inside that?
Yeah, the best way to understand that is to climb into your bedroom, black out the windows, bolt the door shut, and spend 3, 4, 5 months in that room with no communications, no way to talk to the outside world, and go on and off watch for 6 on, 6 off, or 6 on and 12 off for months and months and months on end, with the constant fire and all kinds of stuff that happens in a nuclear submarine. My first run, we were underwater 76 straight days, and we had 5 fires. So it's an adventure. If you can imagine locking yourself into your room and filling it with smoke, sitting on your couch breathing, or sitting on your bed breathing, through an emergency breathing apparatus, that's interesting.
Oh, I can imagine now. For me, I would have been really, really scared, right? Because you're out in the middle of nowhere, and what happens, right? So,
well, take a look at what happened to the USS Connecticut when it ran into a mountain underwater. It's a miracle those guys came up. another sub a few years ago bumped into a Chinese ship,
Mhm.
right? Or a Japanese trawler or something.
Yeah, it definitely takes a certain kind of person to be able to do that. And, did you ever
Yeah.
think that you would I mean, prior to joining, did you ever think you would see yourself on a submarine?
No, no. I again, I can remember saying I'm going to be in the Navy, but I wanted to go in the Marine Corps. And when I was in fifth grade, I remember looking at a map on the wall and saying, "Oh, I'm going there." And the teacher says, "Well, do you even know where that is?" I go, "No, what is it?" She says, "It's Australia." I said, "Oh, well, yeah, I'm going there." And she just kind of chuckled. Well, in my first deployment, I left Groton, went east, met up with the boat in Diego Garcia, which is in the Indian Ocean. And we did a number of months of patrols and then came back through and we did a port call in Albany, Australia, and then in Perth, Australia.
And you
So
were there.
5 years later, right?
That's
Right?
awesome. Did
Crazy stuff.
you Yeah, did you ever, find yourself I mean, obviously, you're sitting on you're in the submarine, and you've got your 6 on, 6 off, however it was set up. How did you get yourself through it, right? I mean, reading, games, what did you do to keep yourself from feeling like you were in some kind of an asylum?
Yeah. So first and foremost, if you're not on watch or training, you got 1 year to qualify submarines. Um, I did it in 89 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Uh, you've got to qualify a ton of watch stations and you're always preparing for something. If you're not qualifying something, the command is training for fire, for battle stations, for chasing Russian subs, for surface warfare, torpedoes, target practice for surface ships. So there's plenty going on. There wasn't really a lot of downtime, and those are just the normal things. Like I said, I lost count how many fires we had. I know there was 5 on my first 3 months deployed, and then my last handful of days, I was ingrained in a pretty terrifying fire that I think I had 5 days left. 5 days left, almost
Oh,
killed
my
me. Yeah.
really? So it
Oh
was
yeah.
that close to you then? So
I was actually the fire watch. We had pulled in from a 2 month run, a 2 month deployment, and I got stuck with the fire watch after a 24-hour cycle. And it's a great story I write in the book about trauma and how you don't realize how trauma affects you or somebody else. And this fire, I mean, I started off all jacked up because I was like, man, 24-hour duty, and we've been gone for 2 months. Give a new guy the fire watch, stand here with a CO2.
right.
As God is my witness, I was sitting on the extinguisher and I heard that voice say, you need to buck up and get on this thing. No sooner did I have the fire CO2 prepped and kind of stand there. 2 kids were debrazing this giant pump. Torch let go, burned his arm, dropped the torch, blew the lag up, and it was just a fireball of disaster circling all around me and yanking this kid out of there, dumping the CO2. By the time I dumped the second CO2, it was already well underway, and it needed a 2-inch main. But you can't leave your post. So I'm standing there, and I'm going. So after all this is how I'm going to die. Can't make this crap up.
Oh my
And then
gosh.
boom, I got somebody grabbed me by the shoulder, and Tommy Newman did. Tommy Newman grabbed me and yanked me out, and they dumped the 2-inch main on it.
And so how long did it take then to get it out?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. I was hacking up along and trying to get
Were you
some.
injured at all outside of all the smoke inhalation?
So yeah, my lungs are a shot. Every time they ask why can't you breathe, it's like you smoked, right? And I'm like, no, not unless the Navy, not unless it was Navy issue, right?
Right, right.
So yeah, I filed my lungs up pretty bad and a few other things, but I got hurt a number of times. We were doing personnel transfers once, and I got crushed between the ship and the sub out in the middle of the ocean. That
Oh,
yeah, pretty good.
oh
Yeah.
gosh. And so what was happening? What happened to actually cause that? So I know you were transferring.
Well, for the guys that are old enough to know the Walker family, who sold all our cryptography to the Russians,
Hmm.
so if you ever want to see the effects of spies selling our secrets, our crypto was compromised. So we ended up doing surface runs to drop out of our op box or whoever we were trailing, and had to break free and surface, get orders in paper. Okay. Instead of sending the messages over the airwaves. So that was part of my job. I was going up and transferring people and messages and so on, and got caught in a bad spot one time and went down between the boat and the surface ship.
Wow.
Yeah.
That does not sound fun at all. So
No.
you spent time in the infirmary and
Nope. They dragged me out of the drink, stuck me in my rack, and 30 hours later is when I woke up. I remember looking up and seeing about a foot and a half of water on my way down, and I don't remember anything for the next 30 hours. The doc shot me up with something. I was in my rack, and I 30 hours. I don't know why 30 hours, but that's it. It's 30 hours. How long was I out? It's 30 hours. Went and saw the chief of the boat. Man, he was thankful I was alive, but what was going on, if I'd have died, they would have, stuck me in a meat locker, and was what it was. It is what it is. Right?
Yeah, I mean, yes, as a mom, to me, that's devastating, right? Just to think about, your child being one injured, but two, if death occurs, they're stuck in as you said, a meat locker, right? A cold space.
Well, you couldn't open up the door and send me home.
I know it, but
Mission comes first.
It is, like, as you said, it is what it is, and I get it. But yeah, that's, oh my gosh. I'm very, very happy that you're here with us today. Obviously to be able to tell this story because there's a lot of veterans that have had obviously not similar. I don't know that you have any two veterans that have similar or identical stories, right? They all see things differently, feel things differently, and even if they're in the same exact place at the same exact time, um, both emotionally, mentally, right? They recall things differently. So it's interesting for me, and I'm sure for other veterans that are listening or will listen to this, to be able to relate to being injured in some way, right? And how they managed to get through it. So after 30 hours of being completely out of it, when you came to and they tell you, okay, you've been out for 30 hours, what happened? I mean, what was the next process? What next step for you?
I did a systems check. I met with the corpsman and went back to work. Right. I was topside doing transfers again, I roughly a week or two later. But I did bring up a different line tender. Again, that's a long story, but I mean, it really is a long story. I gave you the cliff notes on it, but when I went back up, I got to pick my own line tenders. So but you go back to work, right?
Right.
Put a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah, right. Rub some dirt on it and keep moving. In your case, a little bit of salt water, but
Chief of the boat gave me a kiss and said, "Get back to work, kid. Let's go." Right? We got a nation to protect.
There you go. Oh wow. And so, okay, so you were deployed how many times?
I never counted. I know that I was deployed for 2 years and 1 month while attached to the Dallas for 3 years and 2 months. So, we were deployed, was that 2/3 of the time?
Yeah, yeah.
So if we weren't chasing Russians, we were doing other things.
Okay. And you've been to Australia.
Yeah.
And what other countries did you see?
So Kenya, Diego Garcia, La Maddalena, Sicily, Toulon, France, was a Rosie Roads. I was up and down the East Coast, all over the Mediterranean. I mean, we did, I think, 3 med deployments. I can't remember if we did 1 or 2 around the world cruises. I just don't remember. Panama Canal, came back through the canal. That was an adventure. We went down to the Virgin Islands, St. Croix. So France, Italy, Spain. I was in Libya the first time we went after Gaddafi, but I was with the obtained document 3 fleet, which was kind of telling Gaddafi he's not drawing a line across the Med the way he did. Yeah. So it wasn't really in Libya, but we were close enough.
Yeah. Now, did you get to go to port often, or were you when you would um, get into an area? Did they let you go onto land?
Yeah, we did. We did. When I was in, I think it was in France a couple of times, but the first time we went, we took a train up to Paris and I did the classic tour. I saw the Notre Dame and Arc de Triomphe, and I went to the Louvre and saw the Mona Lisa. So and we were in France or Italy, went up to the Alps. So did as much of that stuff as we could. When I was in Australia, though, man, I went ashore with $20. I came back with 17. The women in Australia were something else. Okay, let me just tell you, they were happy to see Americans.
Oh, who's turning red? That's funny. So, okay. And out of all of these countries that you went to, did you have a favorite?
Coming back to the East Coast has always been where I'm most comfortable. But Australia, I got to tell you, Australia, they really took care of us. That was a great place to
Excluding the
be.
women?
Yeah, I mean Australia itself. When we were we drank one bar in Albany out of Foster beer. We didn't think it was possible. We didn't waste any time taking up that challenge. But the people were great. We were docked anchored actually in a harbor in Albany, Australia. It was as cool as it gets until a freak storm came in and we had 17-foot swells, and that changed the dynamics of it. And then transited up to Perth. But Australia is a beautiful country if you're kind of into that thing. So I would say Australia.
Nice. And of course, the food was good.
No, food sucked. Food
Okay.
sucked. They
All
weren't
right.
big meat eaters. It was very expensive to have a steak. And look, on the submarine, the best thing a submarine is food. Okay, they will feed you like there's no tomorrow. Okay,
Oh, wow.
unless you're in battle stations, then you get old on peanut butter and jelly. But
Well, it's got to
other
be
than that,
better than MREs.
you're stuck in a round two below the ocean. Peanut butter and jelly gets old pretty damn quick.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I
Powder,
think
powdered
anything.
milk.
Yeah. Oh, I think anything that is done for any length of time, it becomes old. Just in general. So I suppose that's true. But at least with MREs, they can kind of change up what you're eating.
Yeah, well, I haven't had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich since I left the Navy, so that ought to
Oh
tell you something.
gosh. And so when did you leave? How long were you in total?
So I did 4, but that injury that I took from getting crushed really fouled me up. And what I didn't know is the Navy was doing an eval for disability. I didn't know anything about this stuff, and I didn't have anybody to talk to. So as my end of service was coming up, I was debating what I was doing, and then they told me that, listen, we're gonna have to put you ashore and let this thing get resolved. And I was like, listen, I'm not gonna go pick up garbage for while we wait to see what's going on. So they sent me to VA. I got out after 4 active. I had two in the reserves, so I was 4 and 2, and got sent to VA, and then that process started. Right?
And how did that process go?
Yeah, you want to spend the next 48 hours bad mouthing the VA? I'll put a pot of coffee
Well,
in.
politics is one of those I steer away from, but everybody's got their own opinions of the VA, right? I mean, and I'm going to throw it out there. There is no right or wrong answer when it comes to the VA for people, because there's people who have had absolute perfect experiences and there's others who have had really bad experiences. I've heard both sides of the aisle.
Yeah. Well, if you go to the VA because you need some basic maintenance, okay, most guys in that scenario tell you, I shouldn't say most guys, some of the guys I've talked to from World War II vets through especially Vietnam, um, through the Cold War, and then things changed post 9/11. But for me, it was a nightmare wrapped in a disaster, smuggled in under a blanket full of blood, urine, and
Oh,
nightmare conditions. My first walkthrough in the VA, I write it in detail in it's in detail in A Date with Suicide. Okay, I make poignant details on my first experience with the VA, and there's no doubt in my mind that for me is where PTSD was solidified. Okay, in hindsight, I wouldn't sleep for 24 hours. on the boat because I couldn't. I now look back and say, all right, I can see where these issues kind of started taking a toll. But when I walked into the VA, who never treated me, they never went after the problem. They just started issuing drugs. And my first experience in the VA, and I'll do the very cliff notes here. So when I finally got to the right floor and came off the elevator, there's a World War II vet, just the stench that hit me, his arm reaching out, the hallways lined with patients, veterans. It was as grotesque as you can possibly imagine. If I wasn't under orders, I was still young and thinking I got to follow what these people tell me, I would have turned around and left. Right.
Wow.
But then I went and met with a doctor who spent 5 minutes with me. And I'm telling you, there was a mop and a bucket off to the side. And that was the room we did a medical eval on me. And he said, listen, I don't know what to do with you, but signs the papers and sends me on my way. And a couple months later, I don't remember how many, 2, 3, 4 months later, I get a letter in the mail. It says, listen, you're a disabled vet. I almost threw it away. I almost threw that thing away, but that voice that talks to you,
right.
Voice, no. You're going to want to hang on to this piece of paper.
Yeah.
For me, that was the start of a 10-year process.
With the VA itself?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. The VA finally retired me on injury. And that's kind of where it went. But I spent 25 years fighting the VA to get help. And then when the last administration came in and got the choice program enacted, I went to private care. And I'm not going to exaggerate here, but in hours, I had information. We had a plan. We had checked things off that I couldn't do and things that we could do. And since that first time I went to private medical care, I've made progress.
Right. Well, that's amazing. I'm really glad that you had that opportunity because so many before you did not. And that to me is really important.
Yeah, privatizing the care for veterans is critical. And part of my mission going forward is to get a law in the books that says any veteran who says, I need help, has immediate and instant access to private health care wherever and whenever they need it, period.
Right.
No questions asked. I don't care if you're dishonorably discharged. If you're saying I'm having mental issues, I need help, you are by law, we should have veterans able to go to any healthcare provider anywhere.
Yeah, because it's really difficult because now you go in and say you're there for mental health. You obviously you recognize you need some help, so you go to the VA. It's almost automatic that they say, well, we need to admit you so that we can evaluate you, right? Instead of taking the time, the psychiatrist doesn't even come in the room. They're there in the VA and they just bring out a screen, an iPad attached to a cart, and do an interview that way that lasts 5 minutes. And then that's what they say. And it's like, that doesn't help because the minute they say that, oh, well, we need to admit you so we can observe or get more information, all hell breaks loose, right? Because that's not what you came there for. And so I get it. And I mean, obviously, you've got both ends of the spectrum too, right? You've got those who really desperately do need to be admitted because they're a threat to not just themselves, but others. Fine. I understand it. I do. But in the same sense, when they recognize it and they voluntarily go in to say, hey, I need some help, and then that happens, it's very off-putting, right?
Well, if you're lucky enough to see the same doctor twice, if you're lucky enough for somebody to actually take you in, I am constantly helping vets deal with getting plugged into the VA. And the constant theme, especially on the mental health sector, is it can take anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks to 3 to 5 months.
Right.
A vet called me. Today's
Sunday.
Yeah, yesterday. Called me yesterday and says, you're not going to believe it, but I just got off a computer call with a psychiatrist, okay, who I didn't know was calling me, but they told me that somebody would be in touch at some point. And I go, how long have you been waiting? He said 3 weeks. Now, this is a guy who came to me and said, I'm suicidal. Okay. I've had so many people come to me and tell me this. I've hand walked them to a VA
Right.
and sat there with them while they're trying to get the initial eval, right? And again, the way I see it, the VA wants to jam you into a 7-day, 3-day, 3-month facility to put you away before they even evaluate you. Now, for me, that's not acceptable. For somebody else, that's their decision. Okay.
Right.
But I don't see that as the right approach. Again, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying this particular vet, when his option was to go to 7-day lockup, he said, I'm not going to lockup. What the hell is that? Right. He chose against it, but it took him, I think he said 3 weeks to get a doctor just to get clonazepam and some medication to sleep.
Yeah. And the thing too, though, is once that psychiatrist, if you're physically there and that psychiatrist says we think you are a threat to yourself, whatever they deem, you then even if you walked in voluntarily, you don't necessarily get to walk back out voluntarily. They will hold you.
This is an area that I have to speak very carefully on because we're losing 50 veterans a day to suicide, right? So I don't want to bash anybody trying to get help, but in the same breath, be wise as to what the consequences are for, a VA psychiatrist saying those words to you. You're going to lose your guns. You're going to lose no less than 6 months access to, a lot of things. Just be mindful of these things.
And the other thing too that I recommend is that have somebody with you, right? Because you need, I don't know if you want to call it a witness, I don't know what, but you know, for something like that, you don't want this veteran that you're trying to help to be there alone, right? Get that okay from them to physically go in, sit there, and just be with them.
Yeah, my,
And
my position, Carol Lee, is don't ever go to the VA without somebody there to witness.
right,
And
right,
somebody that's not a veteran is always helpful. Okay. But don't go into the VA without a witness.
yeah,
All right. I
yeah,
could tell
and
you stories for hours on end. Don't go alone.
correct. Well, and it does two things, right? It's twofold. One is a witness, but two, it helps that veteran, regardless of the outcome, though, it helps them know that you didn't just take them there, dropped them off, and now you're on your own, right? You
Yes.
stayed, you're not leaving, and, and you're there for them regardless.
Yeah.
So,
In the civilian world, very few people ever go to the hospital alone.
right,
Why
exactly,
would we go to the VA alone?
right.
Right? You don't. The VA, you go to a civilian hospital. I mean, my wife's had half a dozen surgeries. She's always got somebody there, and the hospitals are always saying, who's the provider? Who's the who are you
Right.
here with?" And they're welcoming. The VA is the opposite. They don't want a witness there.
I do have to say, my oldest Marine, he came home. I took him to the VA. So, and the one here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, in all fairness, has it was very very clean. It was everybody was super accommodating. Even when we went back into the urgent care and we were sitting there, the nurse, the initial attending, all very, very good people, all the way around. And things just went, as I said, downhill, right? Once you get that psychiatrist on the video camera or, that screen. Um, but yeah, they had no issue with me walking back there and sitting with my son while he went through all of the blood work, all of it. Not an issue one. They were very welcoming. So that's the other thing too, unfortunately, is from VA to VA, you're going to have different results.
That's an understatement. That's an
Yeah,
understatement.
I can't speak for others as for other VAs. I can tell from others' stories, good and bad, right? Um, but they say that, obviously mental health is a very big thing. And the one here, they take it very seriously. and which I appreciate. But when you have now, I don't know. I mean, a psychiatrist that is, that sees a veteran, are they a veteran? Does it make a difference if they were a veteran?
The
You know what I'm
psychiatrist,
Yeah.
yeah, it makes a huge difference. Coming out of World War II, the majority of people that went to work at the VA were veterans. Especially when you had a combat veteran would go to the VA, he would be looking for somebody who understood what he'd been through so that he didn't have to tell the story to a novice, to a civilian. All right.
Right.
And that kind of the Vietnam era was the same thing. There was a lot of veterans inside the VA system. Now go into the 80s and they started changing the whole system, and the majority of people inside the VA are not conducive to the people that are coming for help. Okay. And the hardest thing for a veteran to do is trust, right? So you
Right.
go to these things like the VA and you assume they're going to take care of you because that's what's been ingrained in you in the military. Take it up the chain of command, follow orders. These people are here, they're going to do what they say. No, they're not. They're not. So the disconnect between the people that are now the majority, from my experience at VA, are so arrogant and so what's the right word? So me, so don't standoffish, so don't care, right? You're just a number. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, when you go in with someone like you, look, they're going to put their bells and whistles on. But
They absolutely did, not gonna
once
lie,
you're
they did.
gone, once
And
you're gone,
yeah,
it's a different game.
yeah, yeah, and trust is hard even when, if you're not in the military, right? I mean, anyone who has had any kind of trauma in their life, trust is hard. And then, it's even harder when you become a veteran. And now some some people in the military, their NCOs, they're okay with, and hey, go talk to somebody, right? Go see the chaplain, go whatever. And they're affirming that getting help and talking about things is okay. But then you have others, and especially the younger or older generation of veterans. That was, you needed to see somebody. That was not a good sign, right? It was, you were weak and you were, all sorts of bad verbiage, right? And I do see times changing, but again, it depends on your your leadership. And there, there's so many bad leaders just as much as there are good leaders, right? And if you've got a leader who has never ever had any issue and they expect nobody else to have any issue, when you do, then, and you're basically told you're nothing because you got to go see somebody for something, it's a problem. So when they get out, and then that's where they're at, right? They don't want to talk.
Yeah. So that's part of my mission statement, and that's to get people to tell their story. Okay. To open up, to understand that it is okay to have mental health issues.
Right. Right. And just the first inclination, though, when um, doctors, psychiatrists hear that somebody is needing or wanting help, right? It's not like they were brought in involuntarily, right? I mean, they voluntarily come in and they say, hey, I need to see somebody. And just to automatically put that stamp on them and say, nope, we got to keep you, right?
Yeah. So and one of your folks watching makes an excellent point about how the VA is run. The
Yeah.
VA in its biggest unconstitutional event is what we've coined as the super constitutional budgetary funding. Okay. The
Wow.
government was just
Okay.
given $6.8 billion to solve the mental health problems. And the only thing I was on Colonel Mattis show, and he showed me a commercial from the VA. Well, I've never seen it. Okay. But I've seen no positive signs that say $6.8 billion from the VA is making any dent in mental health.
Right.
More importantly, I've watched people that were working in the commissary on a Tuesday be sitting in a meeting appointed as a contracting officer's representative on a Wednesday, running multi-million dollar construction contracts. We had one person who were removing 50,000 gallon fuel tanks from a VA. And this person was in charge of an environmental assessment. And when the oil was leaking to the surface, I said, listen, you guys got to, you're going to have to do a cleanup here. And they said, well, I saw a bird land and drink that water, so we don't think it's that bad. Hand to God, that was her answer. Okay. It was Master Chief Hester, who's now buried in Arlington, was sitting in that meeting because he was one of the liaisons from a congressional oversight committee that was, kind of watching what was going on. The VA is about budgets. That's all they care about. All right. They care about their budgets and they care about their bonuses. Okay. When secretaries and receptionists get $1,500 quarterly bonuses, okay, something's severely broken. When the money is controlled at the levels where you can no longer find it, see it, trace it, or understand where it goes, and everybody's contract inside the VA says, okay, so you got $1 million, and if we get this work done for say 800,000, we get to split the $200,000. That's just wrong.
It is wrong.
Dismantle the VA.
And not just for that purpose, but also it's wrong in the sense that it's the taxpayers that are funding it.
Yes.
Right? And so if it can't be put to the use that it was meant for or earmarked for, it should be going back to the taxpayers.
Yes, we need to dismantle the VA and send our patients to private care. Or let's try something different. Any elected official and everybody that works for the U.S. government must use the VA, period, full stop.
Right.
You want to make changes? Let them.
We know that's not going to happen because when it was Obamacare, how many of them did not use Obamacare? They used their own private insurance. Right. So, we have that in this country, and it is what it is, right? We have to figure out a way, though, to make it happen. I'm really excited.
We're going to put a dent in 50 veterans a day committing suicide. We have to start getting aggressive.
Right.
Okay. And that starts with saying the words out loud. We need to dismantle the VA. We need to give our veterans private health care, period, full stop.
And they need to be able to choose who they see, right? I mean,
That's
because
care.
The other thing with the VA, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So you have one, they go in, they put their enrollment in one particular state or city within that state, but then something happens and they're not in that state, it becomes an issue for them to be seen.
I had a vet reach out to me. This was back when I actually had direct email and the cell phone for the Secretary of VA. All right, that was back when I was part of Vet Force. I had a veteran coming from New York. He moved to Connecticut, and he got my name from the primary care VA doctor who was there at the time. He couldn't get his medications from Connecticut VA because Connecticut VA told him, no, you want your meds to go back to New York. Okay. I kid you not. So I called the Secretary of the VA, and normally what I would do is call the chief of staff at the state's VA level. And I encourage all veterans, don't screw around with trying to chase a chain of command. Go right to the chief of staff in your state, period. Chief of staff of the VA in your state. What I did in this case was I called the Secretary of VA, and I said, this guy needs help. He needs help now. Now, by the end of the next day, he had gotten his medications from Connecticut VA. But for the next 3 months, he was put through such a meat grinder at the VA that he finally quit and went back to New York.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah,
hey, Ron Wayne, thank you for showing up tonight. Appreciate your support. You have a great night. And Ron says, bless you and all you're doing, Paul. So, and Untrackable, thank you. Appreciate you for showing up tonight as well. So, interesting, comments that you've made, because again, I've heard that, right? I've heard a lot of that, and I've heard the opposite too. I mean, but it's almost like unless they have somebody with them who has dealt with it and dealt with the VA, they have to unfortunately figure it out on their own, right? And sometimes just doesn't go well. So that's that's a downside. I do know when I was here at the one in Murfreesboro that um, they were really striving to be one of the best VAs in the nation, and obviously, I think, in my own opinion, they did an excellent job until it got to this person, right? A specific area, and then it just kind of went.
Yeah, there's no doctoring involved there. There's what's on the checklist.
Yeah.
This is the medication. This is the doses. We have to give this to you for this much time. Okay. Yeah, there's no doctoring in there. It's follow the budgetary line items.
Yeah. But so you've you've been dealing with the VA then and helping other veterans for how long?
Almost 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yep.
that's a long time.
Yeah.
And you're in Connecticut.
Yes.
Do you ever go to the VA at all? Have you been
So
lately?
since the choice kicked in 18, I've only gone to primary care. Okay. And I've only gone there under, you know, threat of if you don't. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, I got no interest.
Yeah.
All it is to me is, anxiety ridden insanity. Okay. So no, it's a blessing that I have outside care. And again, I've got a lot of issues. So getting shots of cortisone, I wouldn't get them anymore because of how horribly, how, the way they deal with it. I've gotten them in the private care and it's a godsend. I mean, it's night and day.
And how easy is it to go to the private sector as a veteran? What hoops do you have to go through to be able to get that care and have it paid for?
So if you understand the law and you stand your ground, the VA will constantly try to steer you back here and say, "Well, we can get you an appointment here." And you say, "No, no, no. My law says I can go private care. I'm going private care." Okay, so but you've got to get the VA's blessing. But that's simply a matter of knowing how to manage the paper, right? So you call your primary and you got to do a referral and so on. And then once you kind of have that referral, they'll want to make your appointments. But I tell folks, make your own appointments. Once you're over on the private side, man, I've had nothing but great experiences in the private sector, from dental to eye care to, orthopedics. I mean, it's been night and day. Spent 35 years in the 30 plus years in the VA system, in the last 8, right? 8, 6 in the private care. And it's two completely different worlds. And if you don't think that the physical care, the quality of the physical care affects your mental stability, once I could start getting answers for my physical issues, my mental stability changed in a great way. It really helped me overcome a lot of mental issues.
Right, right. So for those who are looking to actually join the military, we're going to switch gears a little bit. What do you have to say to them?
Yeah, it's a tough time right now, but I got to tell you, you got to follow your heart, right? The military is the greatest opportunity in your life, but you've got to go in with your eyes open. If you're interested in being patriotic and serving your country, then follow your dreams. All right. I have a deep faith that what we do is almost predestined. We're wired to do certain things. 1% of the population is wired to go into the military. Well, if you're part of that 1%, go in the military, but do it with eyes open. And if you get hurt, listen, you volunteer to go in, then accept that you're going to get hurt, and that coming out, you most likely will have some kind of issues. Okay. So go into it with eyes open and then learn from us who have learned the hard way about what happens to you when you go through the military, and let find some mentors, find some folks that are, shouting their mouth off like I am, to try and get some understanding of what it's like once you're done with the military. And then talk to some people who have been through the military, not the recruiters, but people who are a step away from that. So you get some insight into what kind of job training and what is it that would interest you in the military, and then the path to get there before you sign that line, whether it's 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, and if you can look, look to be an officer. All right, because it's a completely different world than the enlisted ranks. But if you're going to go in like I did, then go in with the gumption to be the best of the best of the best, and don't let anything stop you from going forward. Because the greatest thing I've ever done in my life was the time I spent in the military. I've never regretted it. I've never complained about getting hurt. Listen, I knew it. I knew it could happen. I've never complained about that. So going in the military for me is life-changing in both good and bad ways. But once you do the military, they can never take it away from you. And you are one of the 1%ers.
Right. Right. And that's such good information. I know our middle Marine, he is our youngest Marine, middle child, will be hopefully in the next couple of weeks being taking leave, well, terminal leave. So he'll be out early. And unfortunately, he's been stuck in medical since just after boot camp. So he's got his findings and his ratings, both from the DoD and the VA. And so that'll, this is good information, right? As a mom, I want to find resources and different paths to help my kids. So, this has been really a great conversation in my mind because it helps me to help him. And because he'll be on medication for the rest of his life. It just is what it is. So,
Yeah. So again, I think it's important that people like us are out here telling these stories. All right. I know that at times I come across angry. That's more of the energy that is my
passion.
soul. Right?
It's a lot of passion. Yeah.
Right. It comes out of me in so many ways. One of the greatest things I ever did was join the military. But what we're doing now is it more important? Is it as important? Right? Telling the stories and helping the next generation. We've got to have a military or we don't have a country, right? So we've got to look at folks and say, if your passion is to join the military, join it. Now our passion is to serve those who have served and help them in their journey post-military.
Exactly. Exactly. Because and there are so many like yourself who are veterans. They've served, they sacrificed, and they're veterans now, and they continue to serve by helping the community, getting their stories out, helping other veterans, and being there, right, showing up because it's one thing to talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk, right? You can't just say, "Oh yeah, I'm here," and then you call them up and, "Oh, sorry, I'm busy," and or whatever. You got to be there, and because you just don't know when that call is going to come, and it's not an easy thing either.
Well, my first call, I title in my book. The title of the last chapter of the book is, or second to last chapter is, "Who's Your Randy?" Randy was a yeoman on the boat, right, on the submarine. And a few years after we were out, I get a phone call from him a week before Super Bowl Sunday. And I'm young. I got a wife, and we had a third kid on the way, and trying to figure out life. And the vet out of the blue calls me. I haven't seen him in years, if I can remember right. He said, "I need to talk to you." I said, "All right, well, maybe next week, and we can get together for Super Bowl." Okay. Week later, I call his house, and this lady's screaming at me on the other end of the phone. "What the blank are you doing? Why are you doing this to me?" I'm like, "Listen, lady, I don't know you from Adam. I told Randy I'd call him. We'd go watch the Super Bowl." And there's a pause on the phone. And she says, "So you really don't know?" I said, "Don't know what?" She says, "He hung himself right after he got off the phone with you." That was my introduction to veteran suicide. Okay.
I'm so
And that
sorry.
story stuck with me for these decades, right? Because again, back then there was a wall, the telephones were mounted on the wall, not in your
Yeah.
pocket, right?
Right. Yeah.
You know, that was my introduction. So when a veteran calls me and says, "I need to talk," listen, I pass the story on as quickly as I can. So when a veteran reaches out and says, "I'd like to talk," drop what you're doing, Go have a conversation with them. And remember, the conversation when a veteran says, I want to talk, is one-sided. He wants to talk or she wants to talk. That's not a license for you to talk, to judge, or to try to solve the veteran's problems. If a veteran says, I want to talk, your mission is to close your lips and open your ears and listen. If I could tell you how many times I've sat somewhere, coffee, a beer, whatever it was, saying nothing, minutes become a half hour, an hour, and then finally he says something. Okay. They need the time to be able to say it. And sometimes you can sit there for a couple hours and nothing said. But when a vet asks to be heard, take the time to go listen.
Greater words haven't been spoken, I'm sure. And so for any veterans who are listening who haven't, had that call yet, and maybe you get it whenever it is, take those words and run with them, because Doug's got the absolute right answer there. And it's really important to share, be able to listen, but get those resources if they need them, help them, go with them, do whatever you can to support them. So I really do appreciate all that you do for our veterans, and for taking the time out of your busy time to join me tonight in this conversation. I do, yes, I love it. I do want to get a hold of those books, so we'll talk shortly in just a few minutes. But for anybody in the chats, if you do happen to have a question for Doug, go ahead and throw those out there now. Let's take a look here.
I'm a Pisces. I'm 6 foot tall. I'm 72 years old.
No way.
I've been with the same woman for 50 years.
No, you cannot be that old. You do not look it.
I'm not.
I was gonna say, there's no.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret too. I haven't been married for 50 years, but don't tell my wife I say that on these podcasts.
She doesn't watch.
I probably, but it's a funny, because I say to her, I go, we've been married for 50 years, man.
I know.
50 years.
Like eternity. No.
50 years.
I look at my husband. We've been married a little over 20, and it just seems to have flown by. Right. I mean, the youngest just graduated high school. So it does feel like it's gone by really quickly. Let's see. So I'm just kind of going through the chats at the moment, make sure we didn't miss any questions. So we got past all of that. Jim is in an apartment with a non-working AC. It's 95 degrees where he's at. So appreciate you taking the time, Jim, to come out and in this sweltering heat, even on the West Coast, and join in.
Who wanted story time?
I know.
It's a story time. I should have prepped me better. I would have had better stories. I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize. Don't apologize. You had some really good insights, and I think it's important, right, to get there, to get the word out. So, and Untrackable is a great guy. Just recently joined. He's a veteran as well. Just learned that tonight. So I was really excited to see that. Yeah, minor technical difficulties. Let's see. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. Ron Wayne, who I think had to, he might still be here. He did say thank you for your service. And then, let's see. Thank you for sharing your experience. He says, hats off to you. Jason is basically says what you were talking about, kind of some of the VA stuff, and he really hates that there were so many issues back then.
Yeah, well, it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
It's
Untrackable says he doesn't trust anyone.
Yeah, that's the same position I have. I trust my wife, and even there's no other civilians that I trust. My wife and veterans.
Yeah.
It's something that just happens to veterans.
Yeah. We have a new person joining tonight, David Swenson. Thank you very much for joining tonight. We see you out there. Um, let's see. And I know we talked about what Jim had said about the VA being government ran. Our government is a huge mess.
Second largest agency in the federal government.
Yeah. Yeah, lot of things happening with that, with the VA. And let's see, Jim has a business idea because the government has money to spend and it would be a huge game changer for future vets. All enlistees get a counselor for X number of meetings to prepare.
Yeah, so I was on Vet Force when I actually say after they got Public Law 109 461 enacted, which is the Vet First Contracting Act, which requires the VA to hire veteran and disabled veteran first. So if you ever want to have a conversation on veteran-owned business, disabled veteran-owned business, or the spouses of veterans running a veteran-owned business, let me know. I spent 10 years doing this. I spent 10 years volunteering as one of 8 national elected members of the Vet Force. Executive Order 13360, signed by President Bush, requires 3% of spending to go to veterans in all agencies. So there's a lot to say about the veterans contracting plan. So if folks are, if you ever want to have a conversation on that particular topic, I'm pretty well versed.
Excellent. That's good to know. So if somebody wants to get a hold of you, are you okay with me sharing your information and they can reach out?
Yes,
Okay.
not my cell phone. Okay,
Email.
Email or my social media.
Okay.
Okay,
Excellent.
I don't walk around very often with the cell phone.
Right, right.
No.
Um, Jim also does say, too, all active duty military get a different counselor that focuses on being in the military.
Yeah, listen, the military's got to do its job, right? It's
Yeah.
got to do its job. From the time you get off that bus, you're trained to be angry, right? That is our go-to emotion. Okay. But again, if bullets start flying, I guarantee you civilians are ducking behind an angry veteran, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there's, and the thing about it too is not every veteran, as I said before, has the exact same story. So to just treat everybody the same and, with a little template and check boxes doesn't work because everyone sees things differently. Even whether they may have been in the exact same combat or campaign as somebody else, but they've got two different experiences. And it's it's something that both doctors, civilians, even veterans themselves have to recognize in order to be able to help.
Yeah. To piggyback on that, there's no way for me to evaluate another person's trauma. Okay. Because what's traumatic to them may not be traumatic to me. Again, guy in boot camp tried to kill himself. It was boring to me. That's how traumatic it was for this guy. And he was from the Bronx. He was a tough kid. Right. So you can't judge another person's trauma. And in the same breath, veterans are already 1% just for joining the military. So they're unique by nature. So their issues are so unique. We have to be looked at in light of being a veteran, that we come to the table with different issues and they're not all bad.
Right, right. And sometimes all they need is just to talk,
Yes.
and that's it. And they don't necessarily know where to go, right?
Right.
So
So many veterans just say, I want to be heard. I want an answer. Okay. Why won't the VA? Okay. They want to be heard. And sometimes they just want to get their frustrations out. All right. So they can get it out of them and then keep moving.
fine. And that's part of the purpose of this, and this particular podcast is to get the stories out, give them a place to be able to say what they want to say. It's not for me to judge. It's not for me to say this happened, this didn't happen. It's whatever you want to talk about as a veteran. And let me tell you, I had a veteran who said when I first asked him if he wanted to do it, and he's like, I was never in combat. I don't think I'll have anything to talk about. And 3 hours after it was 3 hours long, our show. And he talked about nothing but airplanes. And, but that's what he saw, right? That's his story. Had to do with flying, had to do, in the military, had to, and trying to land on ships and how that worked. That was what he talked about. And that's okay.
One of the things I try to relay to people is that it takes 8 to 10 people to field one soldier with a weapon pointing downrange. So if 8 to 10 is the ratio, then how come we're having 50 veterans a day commit suicide if everybody thinks they're combat soldiers? Well, they're not. The majority of veterans that are killing themselves are not combat soldiers. They're just not. I'm not saying that the number of combat veterans isn't high, but the third highest suicide rate is among female veterans.
Wow,
The
I
third
didn't
highest
know that.
rate. And yet they only make up currently 20% of the United States military. So then how are they third? Well, the last DOD report came out showing that 36,000 cases of sexual trauma, sexual assault, sexual abuse were filed in the last fiscal year. 36,000. Now the female vets and 2.4% of that 36,000 were filed by men. Here's something I learned last week at Rolla, talking to other vets. This is the first time I learned that males have been raped in the military. I never heard of this. Never until last week. So now it kind of justifies where that 2.4% kind of kicks in, right? But when I talk to female veterans, the majority of them tell me that they had some type of, whether it was harassment or outright rape. Okay. Donna Michaels writes a great book in telling her story about being raped, right? And again, the majority of these women don't report what happened to them. So if 36,000 people was the number that was reported, what's the real number?
Correct. And to your point, when it comes to combat veterans versus non-combat or just combat, not necessarily even veteran, the last number I heard was like there out of all of the military, only 18% are have ever seen combat out of the
Well,
entire.
again, let me jump in there. So again, if a convoy is driving from point A to point B, and that's considered a combat zone, those numbers kind of get all thrown in there as well.
Right.
If in Operation Deep Dive, which is now run by Duke University and the folks who put together Operation Deep Dive, they have done and continue to do some phenomenal studies that started back with the 2017 bogus VA report that says we're no longer seeing 22 veterans a day committing suicide. It's down to 17 or 18. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, man, that is such BS. All right, well, Operation Deep Dive rips that thing apart and shows statistically that it's 2.5 times higher than that number, which puts it between 45 and 50 veterans in their 8-state study, right? But what they also point out, and what I've known for a long time, is only 30% of the people who serve in the military ever get put into the VA system. So 70% of the folks that serve are not logged into VA. So then how can the VA be qualified to statistically tell us how many veterans are committing suicide? They can't. And more importantly, the majority of suicides, the VA claims in their report of 17 or 18 vets, they say 13 of those vets committed suicide by gun. Okay. Now, as soon as I read that report, I said, this report is garbage. The majority of veterans that I'm around aren't killing themselves or planning to kill themselves with a gun. Insulin, drowning, hanging, reckless behavior, alcohol, drugs, overdosing on prescribed medications, right? I can sit here for an hour and list all the ways that I've listened to people tell me that, what was your plan? What were you doing, right? This is where the title a date with suicide came from. Because in studying this and then studying myself, I realized that veterans, man, we're methodical, right? We line up all this crap and then it comes down to, okay, now what's the date? Okay. So they pre-plan all this stuff and then figure out a date. And part of my mission is to get to my fellow veterans before they set that date. Once they set that date, listen, you're not going to hear from them.
Absolutely. So Jim, one question. We have one question for you, and that's
Come on,
are
guys,
you
you can do better than that. Give me some more questions.
I know,
Come
right?
on.
It's are you sucking on a Reese's?
So my throat kills me, so I chew on Hall's cough drops. So again, I've never smoked a day in my life, and my throat and my lungs are shot to hell. But
Is there
so it's
anything
hard for me
that
to
they can do for that?
no,
Not nothing.
no, not unless you got
Extra
not
jet
unless you
flying
can
around?
write a check to build a new wing on a hospital, right?
Right, exactly.
So listen, I'm upright. I'm still standing. I'm still walking. Okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. But I do. My wife says he lives on cough drops, right? It
Well, it
does.
could be worse, right?
Hey, right? Could be worse.
That's right.
Well,
So
always could be worse.
exactly. So, but I am not seeing any other questions at this time. However, that doesn't mean that there won't be some in the chats later on. So I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. And
Wow, you guys are disappointing me, man. No questions.
I know,
The
come on.
USS Dallas, a hunt for Red October. You're not even asking about Tom Clancy coming down to the boat. Wow. Wow. Highest
I know.
decorated boat in the history of submarines, guys. Post
I
World War II.
Yeah, it's interesting too. We had a lot that popped in just to kind of say, "Hey, I was showing some support, but I got to run." Um, so, but I can't thank you enough again, really, to take time. You're a very busy individual, so thank you for that. For
Hey, thank you for having me on. And just an FYI, it is my bedtime, so I'm good with the no questions.
Fair enough. So, all right. Well, if you want to hang tight for just a minute, all right. And we're going to go ahead. Please, 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 if you haven't already, go out after the show, hit that thumbs up button, subscribe if you haven't already, and then throw out a comment. Love to hear what you guys think. And um, again, thank you, Doug. Appreciate you being out here. Everybody else, we will see you next Sunday, 6 p.m. Central Time. Again, 6 p.m. next Sunday. We'll see you all then.